What's up, YouTube? This is Steve here. I am your world-renowned heretic, and back with a new deck profile. We're looking at some of the new cards from XY Breakthrough, and although I've got a couple of bigger, badder decks that I think in at least a number of people's opinions here, we're going to look at one that is actually, I think, pretty clever. I toyed around with a couple ideas to make this card work that we're going to play this around, but in the spirit of Halloween, we are going to be looking at a ghost-type deck, and what better ghost to look at than the original, fully evolved ghost-type Pokemon, Gengar, who also happens to be my second favorite Pokemon, behind Lugia. Now, as opposed to looking at the Mega Gengar EX card, we're trying to find more recent stuff, and lo and behold, a brand spanking new Gengar card is included in the XY Breakthrough set, so let's have a look at that evolution line right here. And so we will start with Ghastly, and nothing too special here, but we are going to run 4 copies of this, seeing as to how we are trying to evolve into Gengar. And this Ghastly is pretty simple, 50 HP. For 1 Psychic, it offers a coin flip to inflict both sleep and poison, much like Sceptile EX. 1 retreat, seems like these things should retreat for free, seeing as how they're literally just gas floating in the air. I mean, who knows? And maybe another Pokemon farted one out from another dimension or something. Now, in all seriousness, 50 HP for an evolving basic that goes up to a stage 2. Still, in today's game, it's a little on the low side, but he's not there to be active, he's there to evolve. And he does that very well as his mid-stage. Should we have to use it, we run 2 copies of Haunter. Haunter has kind of an interesting ability in that when you play it from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you can confuse both active Pokemon. So if you don't plan on attacking this turn, or you're going to switch out or something, go right ahead. His attack also inflicts poison and prevents them from retreating. But with Burbank City Gym rotated out of format, now that we're looking at Standard again, which I probably should have mentioned ahead of time, not really sure how useful this is. And again, that 1 retreat just seems a little odd. But, you know, like with his previous form, Haunter here, along with Ghastly, they're just here to evolve. So let's just let them do their job. And finally, if we do get up to our stage 2, we get this big bad guy, Gengar. And so Gengar has a acceptable, I suppose, 130 HP, not too shabby. For 1 Psychic Energy, he does Sinister Fog, which inflicts poison and places 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's benched Pokemon as well. But we don't really care about that. We're here for Gengar's second attack, which is Creepshow. For a Psychic and a Colorless, if your opponent's active Pokemon has 3 or more damage counters on it, it is instantly knocked out. Now, that's pretty scary to think about. Granted, they do need the 3 damage counters, and sure, you could try to see synergy with the poison conditions or the confusion from Haunter or, you know, from the evolution line in general, but we're going to find a different way to put some damage down. Also note that after Gengar is fully evolved and now has legs, ironically, he also now no longer has a retreat cost. But I'm not going to complain about free retreat because that's an awesome thing to have. So 4 copies of Gengar. We run the full 4-2-4 line because this is our main way of killing things. And so this is how we want to score knockouts. And so now we need something that can place 3 damage counters on another Pokemon. And after looking through a bunch of different options, I came up with this. And this is also a little bit of irony. In standard format, Gengar EX. Another Gengar, 4 copies of this, our ideal starting Pokemon, meaning we run a total of 8 Gengar cards, legally, mind you, in this deck. And the reason I chose Gengar EX is because for 1 colorless energy, his first attack, Night Attack, allows you to put 3 damage counters on any one of your opponent's Pokemon of choice, be it they're active or something on their bench, whatever you think they might be attacking with or bringing up forward, so that you can then knock it out with the non-EX Gengar. So Creepshow and Night Attack, nice little combo there. Probably the other way around, Night Attack and then Creepshow, seeing as how we'd be using Night Attack first. So we can use Gengar EX's Night Attack to scatter some damage on your opponent's board early, and then use Creepshow to take some knockouts. And And if you really need it, Gengar EX also has that Dark Corridor attack for 1 Psychic and 2 Colorless, which deals 60 points of damage and inflicts poison, as well as jumping Gengar EX back to the bench. But something tells me we won't be doing that too often. Some other options that I opted against as far as the cards that can place damage, the Crobat line. I initially thought about running the 2 Stage 2 lines, as Bridget would then become a very valuable card as a supporter in a deck that would be running so many non-EX basic Pokemon such as Zubats and Ghastlies. However, the problem is that we need to get all the way to Crobat to deal that 30 damage, even though Skill Dive can then deal an additional 30. However, I'd just rather assume just deal the 30 with a basic Pokemon. And the other portion of that I think that makes Crobat a little tougher to use is that Golbat, the middle form, Crobat's stage 1 form, only places 20 damage, which means that you would have to do Golbat's ability and then his attack to get the 3 damage counters necessary. The final card I'm going to look at that I chose not to use here is Team Magma's Secret Base, which places 2 damage counters on any basic Pokemon that is placed on the bench while this card is in play. And I will make that very clear here in a little bit as to why this card was not included in the deck as a means of putting extra damage on something, and some of you can probably already guess why. But we will get to that. Rounding out our Pokemon lineup, we have 3 copies of Shaman EX to draw us extra cards. We run a lot of evolutions, so we are going to need ways to continually be able to draw cards, keep our hand size full, and also it is important to remember that in standard format, even with the release of Breakthrough, there is not much in terms of draw support when it comes to our supporters, so we need to find other ways to search and draw cards. So speaking of drawing cards, 4 copies of Professor Sycamore. This is pretty much the gold standard, has been since Juniper, the black and white on rotation, and for me, even in the late portion of the HGSS on, when EXs were reintroduced. But, I don't see that changing anytime soon, so 4 copies of Professor Sycamore. Next, we run 2 copies of Judge, a supporter card that actually, coincidentally, was in the HGSS arc and has since rotated out, and now, after a significant amount of time, is coming back with a re-release in Breakthrough. This is like our new replacement for N, as both players shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 4 cards. And 4 might not seem like a lot to have in your own hand. It might seem like too many late game for your opponent, but you can also throw that the other way around and say, you know what, I'm only at 1 prize, but I can still judge to 4 and shuffle my hand in, not lose anything. Or we can drop our opponent down to 4 cards on the very first turn. So even if they have 1, 2 basics on the board, they'd still be having 1 or 2 fewer cards in their hand than they normally would, as well as any additional draws they would have had if you drew any mulligans to start the game. Next, 2 copies of Lysander, of course, because when we night attack something, we want to then bring it up and knock it out. Maybe we'll do a few night attacks, and then we'll just start picking stuff off late game. Seems like it would work pretty well. So 2 copies of Lysander, 1 copy of Hexmaniac. We don't really rely on anything in terms of abilities here. I mean, Haunter has an ability that we're really not going to use, hardly ever. We also have Shaman EX, but that's more of an early game kind of deal, I think, most of the time. And I don't think you're ever going to play Hexmaniac and then afterward need to play a Shaman. I think if you have the 2 to play in the same turn, we're pretty much going to be able to play our Shaman first and be just fine with that. 1 copy of Pokemon Fan Club, which can search out Shaman EXs for draw power, as well as our Gengars and Gengar EXs. Get that Gengar EX up in the active slot turn 1, and get our Ghastlies out early so that we can eventually get our Gengars on the bench and ready to take knockouts. And our final supporter is 1 copy of AZ, and this is primarily an additional way to switch out our Pokemon as well as reuse Shaman EX. And I say additional because we will have 1 other form of switching out that is very user-friendly for this particular deck. But AZ is never really a bad option, and he can be recycled with Versus Seeker, which, as you can imagine, we play a few of those. We're going to get onto our Stadium card now, and the reason that we do not play Team Magma's Secret Base, and that is 4 copies of Dimension Valley. And this card, unlike in some of the other decks, like the Mega Mewtwo deck you saw me play this in this Gengar deck, this card really does make a difference, because here, seeing this, with Gengar EX, Night Attack becomes free, costs no energy to use with Dimension Valley on board, while Dark Corridor actually becomes manageable at 1 Psychic and 1 Colorless, although we still probably won't be putting more than 1 energy on really anything in this deck. But making Night Attack free of use means that if we were to open up with a different Pokemon, we wouldn't even need to attach an energy to Gengar EX if we have Dimension Valley in order to use that first turn Night Attack if we go second, or second turn if we go first. And then, of course, with the Stage 2 Gengar, this is also just equally as big, if not even bigger, is that this reduces the attack cost of Creepshow down to 1 lone Psychic Energy to basically take automatic knockouts. So, can't really argue much with that. Item lineup here, we're going to have 4 copies of VS Seeker, or Versus Seeker, whatever you want to call it, to get our supporters back. This is a pretty solid card. I don't really have anything else to say about that other than that you play 4 copies of this in almost every deck unless you're playing Vileplume. Next is 4 copies of Rare Candy, because we do play a Stage 2 line in a 4-2-4. Now, 2 copies of Haunter and 4 copies of Rare Candy might seem excessive, but let's be real about this. We're just trying to get those Gengars out quickly, and you can't exactly rely on 1 Gengar to take 6 prizes for you, even if you do hit 3 EXs. Chances are they're going to have some way of dealing some damage back to you. Now, due to space constraints and trying to fit a couple other things in this deck, we run only 3 copies of Ultra Ball. However, that seems to be okay given the 3 Shaman EXs and Pokemon Fan Club, plus our 4 Versus Seekers that we have available. Plenty of ways to get our basics and search other Pokemon as well as draw cards on the board. So, Ultra Ball will mainly be to drop our hand size count, our hand count, and then search out our evolutions as well. Haunter and Gengar. Next we play 3 copies of Crushing Hammer and 2 copies of Enhanced Hammer. And these cards are mainly because we do need a couple turns to set up the board, so why not try to slow our opponents down, keep them from KOing our Gengar EXs and taking too many prizes too early on in the game so that we can execute our strategy to the best of our ability and be able to take down a bunch of Pokemon with Gengar's Creepshow attack. Next we have 2 copies of Battle Compressor. Of course, mainly this is here to drop our supporter cards into the discard pile so that we can retrieve them with Versus Seeker. And this can also be useful mid to late game to drop anything that you maybe don't want to draw for a specific matchup. Like, let's say we're going against a deck that does not run any copies of, or any special energy cards. We can go ahead and drop the Enhanced Hammers immediately. Of course, that just being one example. You can always drop excess Gengar EXs late game if you've already spread some damage with Night Attack, and anything else that might not be useful at the time. If you have a full board setup, maybe you could drop Ultra Ball. Maybe you aren't really going for hammers late game, and you just go ahead and decide you're going to drop something else. Remember that the requirement to play this is up to 3, and most of the time you're only ever going to want to play 1 per game, so that 3rd card can also easily be the 2nd Battle Compressor. Next we run 1 copy of Super Rod. I tested around this and Sacred Ash to see which one I liked better, but I ultimately settled on Super Rod even though it has fewer targets. The ability to get basic energy back as well as Pokemon is pretty useful, and most of the time, as far as Pokemon go, we're just going to be getting Ghastlies back with this, unless we have to Sycamore away multiple Gengars, let's say, in the beginning in the first hand, or our Haunters in a Vileplume or Seismitoad matchup. And then finally, we have 4 copies of Mystery Energy. This is our other form of free retreating, and another reason as to why being able to use Night Attack free of any energy cost is very, very powerful in this deck, is that if we were to lead with a Ghastly, we can simply attach a Mystery Energy, retreat it for free, and it will maintain its energy for Gengar's attack later on, and still be able to use Night Attack by bringing our Gengar EX forward and having Dimension Valley in play. And then finally we round off the deck with 3 basic Psychic Energy. Just so we have a total of 7 energies. It is also, I believe, worth noting against Aegislash EX that Aegislash is only immune to damage dealt by an attack. So when you look at how many special energies are here, that Aegislash, again, its ability only prevents damage dealt to it by an attack from a Pokemon with special energy attached to it. However, since neither Night Attack nor Creepshow is actually dealing damage, Mighty Shield is moot in this matchup. However, with our 4 copies of Mystery Energy, you will want to keep a close eye out for Giratina EX's Chaos Wheel. Fortunately, we have 2 Enhanced Hammers and 3 Crushing Hammers to help us deal with that. But that is our Gengar deck right here for Halloween. Definitely give it a try. Again, if you want to look at the 2 Gengar cards right there, Gengar and Gengar EX, and Gengar EX over on the right, he's pretty sneaky. He's definitely a Halloween type. Like, wait until after dark and 3 damage counters. And the Stage 2 Gengar, well, can't really hide that. He just likes to kill stuff. And he does a pretty damn good job of it. But that's what we're looking at right now, Gengar and Gengar EX. And until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed this. And go ahead and give it a try. See how it works for you. Maybe see if you find some other cards that might help this work out better, or more consistently, if you happen to like it. And I will definitely be back with more videos here very soon. I look forward to seeing everybody at the City Championships upcoming, as I am planning on attending the Indianapolis Marathon Thanksgiving weekend. Until next time, cheers.